What if every experience, every hardship, every obstacle was given to you, not to break you, but to mold you and strengthen you? What if the center of your suffering was actually the key to ultimate health? And what if your own pain was meant to be the catalyst for your greatest purpose? Welcome to Buddha Belly Life, empowering purpose, mind to microbiome. Welcome to the Buddha Belly Life podcast. I'm Coach Britt, and today I am joined by yet another of my awesome certified coaches. This is Kristin Mongler. She is a certified health coach, certified holistic gut practitioner, a nurse, and she also studies and practices a bit of hypnotherapy. She's going to be here today to share an incredible story of a journey through and post childhood cancer, all that came with that, and all it's created in her. So welcome.
Thanks,
Kristin.
Coach Britt. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, I'm stoked to have you. Yes, I'm so cool. So you're the second coach that we're featuring on the podcast, which is really cool. I'm doing more of this because what people usually don't know, like people outside of HWCA, or maybe some of the coaches don't know about each other, but most of our coaches have a story. You know, everybody has a story, but a lot of our coaches have had pretty intense stories of sickness, suffering, loss, just all kinds of life stuff, the harder things. And I hear most of those stories. I get to hear those when they're contemplating doing training. And what's cool is I get to intercept at the point that you guys are coming from a place of pain and experience, and you've moved through something. Maybe you're still moving in it, like we always are, and using it at that point, wanting to use it outside of yourselves to help people. And that's what you've done. So I'm really excited to share your story. Can you give us a little background on the beginning?
So I grew up in a small mid-Missouri town. I came from a typical family. I went to school. I was a high achiever. I really enjoyed learning. Everything was pretty wonderful. The first thing that happened that really threw me for a loop is when I was 14 years old, I got really sick and we didn't know what was wrong. And so it took a lot of visits to the doctor's office. It took my parents being an advocate and saying something is wrong with her, after the doctors kind of brushed it off as, I was depressed or whatever. But it turns out that I was very ill. I was finally diagnosed by a very competent physician that said her labs are all off. She is very ill, and we need to get her to the hospital right now. And that was a blessing, a total blessing, because I found out later I had 48 hours to live at that point.
Wow. And what kind of symptoms and things, like what were you dealing with at the time? Like what did they figure out when you finally went to the hospital? What did they say it was?
Grade, and it came on very suddenly. I just passed out at my graduation, which was very unlike me. I was very active. I played sports. So that was kind of my first sign. And then it was summer, and I'm very naturally dark complected. I was very pale. I was very tired. I was sleeping all the time. I didn't have any energy. As a 14-year-old, I should have been out running around doing things for summer, but I just had no energy. And then I remember we went on a 4th of July. We went on a houseboat to go skiing, and I got out on the water and I got back on the houseboat where a big party was going on, and I went to sleep. It was so out of character for a active teenager, and I could kind of hear people in the background. And I was running a fever, and I didn't feel good. And all the while, I somehow discovered a mass in my abdomen. And so I was palpating a mass in my abdomen and feeling it. I even went to the doctor. They did an ultrasound and told me it was stool in my colon. But I kept watching it, and I kept thinking this is odd. And so finally, as it progressed, I was vomiting. I couldn't keep food down. I was just very sick. So when they did my labs, they found out that I went to an oncologist, hematologist, and then come to find out I had a very aggressive form of cancer called Burkitt's lymphoma. It's one of the there's several hundred non-Hodgkin's lymphomas, and this one in particularly was very aggressive. It was usually found in young males in Africa, and it swells up the lymph nodes in approximately 48 hours. But in the United States, it's found in your abdomen. And so my lymph node in my abdomen grew to the size of a grapefruit. And then that caused, basically an obstruction. By the time it was found, it was stage 4, and it was involving 99% of my bone marrow. And that's why I only had 48 hours to live.
Oh my gosh. And so how did they handle that 48 hours? What did they do in that moment? How did you get from she has 48 hours to live to even the battle of the cancer?
By this time I'd been so sick, just hearing that I had a diagnosis and someone was finally listening and there was something wrong. Right. And my doctor put it really eloquently. He said, "You have some weeds in your garden and we need to pull them. And the way we're going to do that is put you on chemotherapy." So they immediately started one of the most intensive chemotherapy regimens there are, because the more aggressive the cancer is, the more aggressive the chemotherapy has to be. So right then and there, I didn't leave the hospital, and it became my way of life for about 6 months.
Wow. Yeah. So I saw your post about this a bit ago, and I saw you sharing some of this stuff, a little bit more about that process and people weighing in. That was a butt kicker. Their recollections of you being a sick little girl. That was really heartbreaking to read, and really cool to know you now and know the after story, but just as a mom, to know you as an adult, it's different, because I just see, we hear a little kid, and just as a parent and any human, right, who cares, but just to hear, some of the people commenting saying they remember you just saying your tummy hurt a lot, and just like, and laying around when they didn't know what was wrong with you and all that. I mean, that's pretty amazing. And so the cancer story. So after 6 months, is that when did they get it into remission, or was this like, how was that part of the journey? What did that look like?
The chemotherapy was brutal, to be quite honest with you. It was worse than the cancer. Chemotherapy is designed to kill all rapidly dividing cells. So that means the cancer would be killed, but my entire esophagus and the whole gut lining was hemorrhaging, vomiting up blood. Not a lot of recollection. The chemo destroys the nerves in your hands and feet, and I lost my ability to walk or to button my clothes. So the intense rehabilitation and physical therapy and occupational therapy that went along with that journey was so very intense. It just weighs on you in a way you just can't even imagine. I remember having so many blood transfusions. I was hemorrhaging so fast they couldn't put the blood in me fast enough. My kidney shut down. I was on dialysis 3 times in that time. They told my parents she won't make it through the night. I was just so incredibly sick. Of course, I didn't know that at the time. They were very, very good at hiding that from me. But you hear the stories afterwards, and the things come together. And a lot of my memory from that time is recollection from other people telling me about things, because when you're that intensely sick, it's almost like you dissociate from your body, just as a coping mechanism. So the chemo regimen that I was on, it was supposed to be 6 rounds. They ended up only doing 5, because each and every time I would get sicker and sicker, and, my organs would shut down, like my kidneys, or I was also having allergic reactions to the antibiotics to, keep me safe and keep the bacteria gone. but I was having intense allergic reactions that would make me break out in a rash from head to toe, and even my palms and the soles of my feet would peel, and I would have fresh baby skin that came up. Luckily, my parents, being the advocates they were, finally said, well, that antibiotic, every time you give it, she breaks out. She's allergic to penicillin. Let's not do that last time and see what happens. And they were right. They battled and went against all the doctors to, do what they thought was right for me when it was kind of going a little bit against the grain. But they were absolutely 100% right. And I'm glad they trusted their instincts.
Yeah. And that's, I've talked to a few moms this week actually who've been struggling with some things too. And I think the importance of people being a part of the process and aware, and like you say, using your instincts, and coming from obviously a nursing background too. I'm sure you have a lot to speak on that, but that's so important. So when you finally got the free and clear, at what point, how long post initial discovery of this cancer did you get like the remission where you told you were basically in remission?
Well, I was diagnosed on July 27th of 1989, and my remission day came 2 days after Christmas. I was trying really hard to get out of the hospital, but it was December 27th of 1989. So that's 5 intense months in the hospital, and I'm fortunate and blessed beyond measure to not have to ever say that I have gone out of remission. In fact, my cancer was so aggressive that they used the word cure back then for my cancer, which is absolutely amazing because they don't really do that these days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a miracle story. I mean, that's insane. So the after process, so like you said, so you disassociate, which people do. It's kind of when you're severely sick or injured or anything like that. At what point did you kind of come back into your body? Because I'm sure you didn't come back into that vibrant 14-year-old girl that was out playing sports and doing all that. So at what point did you come back in, and what came after that process for you? Like, was there more mental and emotional coping and things that came after? Because I feel like nobody talks about after. And I feel like, a lot of the health arena, or like at least conventional medicine, at least when cancer, it's like, oh, good, you're free and clear. Your numbers are good now, or you're in remission, or you're whatever. And then it's like, boom, we don't talk about anything, not just the mental and emotional trauma and experience, but the state of the body having gone through such incredible destruction from the treatments and things, and that that leads to. So can you give us some insight on that?
And I really appreciate you asking, because battling the cancer was hard. It was physical beyond measure, but afterwards, and the mental anguish and the lifetime struggle of being a survivor has been the hardest part of it. So when I came out of the hospital, I couldn't walk. I was in a wheelchair. I'd missed 6 months of school. I couldn't even move my hands to button my shirts and that kind of thing. So it was an intense year-long physical therapy to learn to walk again, to learn to use my hands, to allow those nerves to regrow that were destroyed from the chemotherapy. Then I didn't eat. I didn't eat while I was in the hospital. I was fed TPN through a tube in my vein because my GI tract was just so depleted. So when I got back out, I had to learn to eat again. I remember like literally in the hospital having to eat and being on a calorie count so they could make sure I could handle eating. It's such a mind... Mm-hmm. It blows my mind that when I was in the hospital, we used to go to the cafeteria and I would have my bag of TPN and my parents would be eating. And I'm like, what a waste. 3 times a day, 30 minutes a day to eat. How inefficient. So I had all these mindset stories in my mind about what was going on, not to mention the fact that I went from a very healthy, like probably 120 pounds I lost and got down to, I think, at 98 in the hospital at 5'6". And I rapidly, when I started eating, started gaining all this weight. And so then you have a teenage girl who is supposed to be thin and gains all this weight. And then I thought I was fat. And I immediately went into a bulimic type pattern. It was so unfortunate. It was just how I coped with that weight gain. I would take the food that I could. I would go out, go on a run and vomit it up, or I took laxatives and diuretics. And it was another blessing that my parents found those, went to my oncologist, and he said, I did not save you to have you die from bulimia. And luckily, I was really receptive to that, and I stopped right away. But the journey afterwards was just as intense and as hard, and learning the coping mechanisms over my life to deal with this survivorship that no one gave you support for. I had all the support in the world in the hospital and to get through, but then they're like, okay, go out there, do life again. And I'm like, but I'm...
We're all so relieved. Oh, thank God we all got through that.
Yeah. And so,
right?
You go out there and you try to pick up where you left off, and there's just a lot of unanswered questions. You know, I developed depression and anxiety and diagnosed with PTSD because that was such a traumatic thing for people to go through. And I was given the typical regimen of antidepressants, just like people do. And, you know, when you know better and do better, fast forward to current times, I know that the serotonin is made in the gut. Why weren't they talking about these nutritious foods that I could do, or getting me more supportive therapies instead of giving me Band-Aids for something that was very real, and the support network that I needed to change my thoughts, you know? So I think that's really important. It's a huge part of my story and my purpose today.
Yes. And so I'm excited for you to share that part. And I just want to linger on that middle part for just a minute, because just what we know being in gut health, and obviously we practice holistic gut health. So when we talk about gut health, we're not just talking about that belly or, you know, bathroom habits, right? We say holistic gut health as mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual, and how the entire body in all of its functions, mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, affects one another. And what we can say from your experience, what we know for certain, is that you went through excessive emotional, mental, physical trauma. You saw many harsh antibiotics in order to keep you from getting, you know, bad bacteria while you were in that vulnerable state. So we know that it decimated a lot of, you know, your gut bacteria and your body bacteria and all that. And we know that all of those things affect the entire function of the body, especially the brain. Even things like when you talk about the compulsivity to bulimia and stuff, like, I mean, I would be willing to bet too that was exacerbated by a lot of the communication happening too, more than just self-consciousness, but, you know, those bacteria that are, you know, communicating compulsive and depressive and anxious, you know, signals and the neurotransmitters in the brain firing, and probably that emotional, and I'm just inferring this, okay, right? But looking at it this way, in that emotional experience of being so out of control of something. A lot of people, when they develop any kind of eating disorder or behaviors like that, they're trying to gain control of something they didn't. So unfortunately, it's cool that you listened to your doctor when you said that, but unfortunately, it's really sad that someone wasn't saying, hey, I understand this process, what you just went through on a deep level. So I understand what your body and your brain are dealing with chemical, like, you know, hormonally, chemically. I understand, you know, the control aspect. You've been through this thing where everything was yanked out of your control at such a vulnerable, that's already the hardest age. We have an almost 13-year-old right now. And like, oh my gosh, junior high, like it was not like that for me. It's so hard, like just the phases and everything. So what you went through, it was such a multifaceted undoing an experience for you, that the only way to recover a lot of that, I believe, is to understand more of the immensity of how that happened, and then come at it with that multifaceted support of understanding what was really done to you during that process. So, that's unfortunate. That's really cool that you have that ability now to bring that to other people. Do you have a desire for fulfillment? Does helping people tap into their own health mentally, emotionally, and physically fire you up? Do you believe in the impact of the gut microbiome on overall wellness? You may be an HWCA coach. For more info on our cutting-edge health coach trainings, visit hwcacoach.com.
Yeah, I think this was over 30 years ago. Things were a lot different then, and I am certainly blessed to be alive. But as a teenager going to high school for the first time with a walker, a cane, and a wig because I was bald, I remember catching my reflection in the mirror. I didn't even recognize myself. And so that's really a critical time in a girl's upbringing for, body image and identifying with yourself and getting some of those self-esteem things. And it was mine was at negative 300, and just certainly, happy to be alive, but it definitely left some mental scarring that I've had to really battle with over the years. And my story is long and hard because I didn't learn all those things when I was young. And that's one of the things that drives me so much now. I'm actually finally committing to writing a book about my experience. It's been a lifetime goal. And, the reason why is because I don't want people to suffer like I did for so long and not know some of the coping mechanisms or the negative pattern of thinking or the body self-esteem things and all the whole struggle that after cancer brings to you, because no one talks about that. Everyone talks about the battle with cancer. They don't talk about what happens afterwards. They don't talk about the mental struggle. They don't talk about the gut microbiome and building that back up. And I think we're getting to a place in society where we're starting to talk about that. But we're not quite there yet. We need more support for that after cancer care, I think.
And that's absolutely right. And were you able to share your struggles with anyone? Did you struggle with feeling guilt or shame? If you felt not okay, if you felt sad or depressed or unhappy or self-conscious, did you struggle with feeling any kind of shame or guilt? Like you weren't supposed to feel those feelings because you were you're past the cancer.
It's a double-edged sword. I felt this great thrill and vibrancy for life, and I wanted to take life by the horns and experience everything possible. But at the same time, that guilt and shame comes in when cancer survivor guilt. It's a very real thing. When I saw someone that was diagnosed with it, I would sink into this deep, deep depression, almost days in bed. Why me? Why not me? God, please take me instead of them. I'm a single person. I don't have any kids. They're a wife and mother, or whatever the story was. I always turned it back on myself that I didn't deserve to live. That is a huge part of my story that it just last year, I did some very deep work on that. I still had the belief in any time someone was diagnosed with cancer or was struggling, I would want that to be inflicted back on me because I didn't deserve to live. Why me? It was always the question. And the truth is I had to do a lot of really deep inner work and come to my why to figure out why me? I'm here for a reason. There's a greater purpose for me, and I need to connect to that and kind of rise up. And so I've had a really challenging year with people around me, and that why me, that I don't deserve to be here, they do, it doesn't exist anymore. This is the first time in my life when I feel that kind of freedom. And I hate that I had a struggle for so long, but I think that's really powerful for other people to know.
Absolutely. Wow. And that's something that only someone on the inside can know. Like those are things that I think, thank you for sharing that with people, because it helps people who are close to people that are struggling with cancer or post-cancer or things like that, like more understand maybe some of the things they're thinking and going through. You know, it's kind of like mental health in general. Like if you haven't experienced anxiety and depression, like how do you empathize with somebody if you can't relate at all? And the why me thing, that's really interesting. And, I heard a lady speak a while ago. She actually was the founder of all the orange theories in the US, right? All the orange theories, they're like CrossFit. They would hate probably if you said that. But she was the founder of that. And she remembers like she used that term when she was talking about she had the potential to create something really big, but she was like, ugh, like the self-doubt came in, like, what? Like just little old me, why me? Why would I have the potential to actually make this work and succeed? And she said, but then something clicked for me. And I went, why not me? Why not me? And it was really powerful. It was actually incredibly powerful until I flew back from this seminar. And I'm terrified of flying because I do not enjoy flying. And I'm on the plane and then we're hitting like, they're trying to find their like altitude, right? And so they're going up and down and I'm like, oh dear God. And I'm like grabbing the front of the seat just by habit. Like I can't help it. By these two strangers, I'm flying by myself. Got Enya blasting in my ears and it's not working. And I'm trying not to have a panic attack. And I'm like, so I'm turning rational, right? I'm like, the majority of planes do not crash. Like you have a way higher probability of being in a car accident or whatever. Like the chance of it being this plane is very low. And then that crept in, but why not this plane? And it was like, and I was like, no, this is a very negative feedback loop right now when you do this. But that aside, but why not me when it comes to the big stuff, right? Like a lot of people would say with a background of any kind of trauma, the statistics show that your propensity to, for addiction, for mental health that debilitates you, that you don't come out of, all the statistics for all those things rise greatly. Yet you're sitting here, a nurse, a coach, you're continuing to move. You're going to write an amazing book about it, which I'm excited to see. And you're doing all this incredible stuff. So why not you, right? Why you? Because you have something extra. You were chosen to be in this position. You were chosen to do this thing. And for the people who maybe are struggling or have a different outcome than you are a gift to their life too. You're a gift with what you bring to their environment, to their caregivers, to all of that. Like you're a gift, you're an advocate for them. So absolutely. But I understand that would be like we can't understand it when we're out of the shoes, but I think that that's a really special story. So give us a little insight then after the fact, because I know that all that you went through early on with your body and the experience and all the, you took a beating in multiple ways. So this affected your body later. Where did you have to deal with additional obstacles as time went on, like with health and with things like that?
Well, I was pretty healthy. It took me a year or two to get back my stamina, for the nerves to grow back. And then I kind of went on with some mental health issues of depression, but I still went to college. I was inspired to be a nurse. I went and did that. I had a great career in ICU nursing, which felt very meaningful and purposeful. I went and I traveled across the country as an intensive care unit nurse. And then I settled back into my hometown when I reconnected with my husband. But mostly in my 20s and 30s, it was probably a mental challenge, just with that depression, those triggering instances when someone was suffering and I felt helpless. And you talked about lack of control. It was very much a lack of control issue when I felt like I couldn't help. And so in my 30s, I started having some heart arrhythmias, which come to find out I ended up having like an atrial septal defect, which is a small hole in your heart, which is not uncommon. But as time wore on, in my 40s, I started having what I call my autoimmune symptoms. And so I really started swelling. My joints were really hurting. I was just really fatigued. I didn't feel well. And, going back to that intuition, I was like, I just don't feel right. I feel like there's something I could pinpoint my finger on. And I kept exploring and trying to figure things out, and the medical community couldn't pinpoint anything. That's what led me on this journey to figure things out for myself. And so I don't even know. I ended up connecting with a really good naturopath who listened to my symptoms and didn't say I was crazy for once.
Right?
She ended up doing some stool testing and found that I was like overrun with candida. My diet, had a stressful position in nursing through COVID. I wasn't eating right. I wasn't taking care of myself.
Yeah.
I was also, doing a lot of things, getting my master's degree. So come to find out, I was overrun with candida. I had adrenal fatigue. I had insulin resistance. And I just needed to start caring for myself better, which is how this whole gut health journey came together for me, because I was like, wow, I've been struggling for 2 years with this. I knew something was wrong. The medical community didn't listen. I need to take this full force and go with it. And at that time, I was already becoming a nurse coach, board certified under my nursing license. And so that was just the added step I needed. I was like, if this is going on with me, and I was in the dark for 2 years, and the doctors didn't listen to me, this is important. I need to follow my intuition and roll with this, because this can help other people. That's how I met you.
Yeah. Yay. I know. It's so cool. It's so cool to be able to be just a part of your guys' story and journey, right? Because it's just so neat. And I love watching, I will say this over and over and over again, because there is a big divide between the functional medicine and holistic community and traditional allopathic, right? And for a lot of reasons, we understand that. But what stinks is there's a lot of people that have traditional credentials that have gone these routes, that are nurses and registered dietitians and even MDs and things like that, who believe in advancing. They still have a thirst for deeper knowledge. They do study the functional body, right, as one whole thing instead of just compartmentalized, right? Ear, nose, and throat. I don't see anything here. Send you on to someone else, right? There are people that do that. And all of you nurses that are branching, especially from COVID. I mean, especially after COVID, we had a big influx of nurses going, all right, I'm leaving, I'm going into coaching. And it was so cool to watch that, because you guys took, you're taking all this experience and this education, and then you're growing more in that, and you're just adding stuff to your toolbox. And now you're out there using it with people, and they can feel comfortable. They can trust you, because they're going, okay, this isn't one or the other. This isn't, just a coach or just a, someone who's, just in the hippie world here, and then just regular medicine. You guys are helping show and support a very necessary union in health in order for people to get helped. And when you're talking about things like hormone, thyroid, adrenals, things like that, it is so rampant in autoimmune conditions. It is so rampant, and people aren't getting help, because until they're popping major signs on typical blood tests, they're being pushed off. There's nothing wrong with them, quote unquote. They're crazy. And if you've ever struggled with hormones, I feel like majority of women I talk to express some sort of concern with hormonal regulation and being off in their adrenals and things like that, especially during childbearing, rearing years. But their tests are fine. Their blood work's fine, right? Because we pull very basic thyroid panels and we don't understand the gut connection. So being where you're at now, like where are you going with this, Christy? Like what is your biggest dream? Like what would you share with people when your whole experience being a sick child? And it's no wonder you were going to struggle with adrenal, thyroid, stuff like that, because there is such a gut connection. There is a trauma connection to autoimmunity and all these things, right? There's all these things. And you have all that stuff in your early life, very, impressionable, vulnerable time of life. You have all that in your experience. So it is absolutely understandable that your body would then present challenges later on. So what have you done since then? How have you seen improvement in things? Like what would you give other people who feel defeated, who feel like they don't have answers, who are struggling with any of these kind of things that you've...
What I've learned since then is I could have treated the root cause with a whole foods diet and elimination without knowing what the problem was, because that actually fixes so many things. So probiotics, like after my cancer journey, I wish I would have known that, but I know it now. So I know better and I do better. Good probiotics, whole foods, the processed foods that our diet has consisted of as Americans does not feed us nutritiously. And it will cause major chronic diseases. And I think we all kind of know that, but it's just so convenient. It's just so easy, and we fall in that trap. We get so busy in life that we go for the easy thing. And it's going to be, adding up over time. And that's why I saw so many of those people in the ICU with heart attacks and diabetes and, all the illnesses that, compiled over the years, or obesity. So just trying to go back to our roots, that whole food diet. And you can't do everything, so just do the best you can. I mean, I've found that wheat is a huge... Wheat, sugar, alcohol, and dairy are all inflammatory foods that don't serve my body well. When I overindulge in those, like
I'm the same way.
My body tells me the swelling comes back, my eyes get black and dark, and my body starts screaming, stop. And, it tastes so good. You don't want to, but, at some point you have to take accountability and you just have to do what's natural and healthy and how our bodies were designed. We weren't designed to eat McDonald's 3 times a week or, frozen pizzas or what have you. And I still indulge in some of that some of the times, but I mean, my diet changed drastically. And fruits and vegetables are the best place to start. So I think you asked me for one thing and I gave like 6, but...
No, that's awesome. And I agree with you. Like, I think what I love that you said in there was 2 things. I don't remember both of these things. One is that I think you show an awareness. I think that's the most important piece. Like people get stuck on, and when we do protocols, when we do elimination protocols, I think people can get kind of funky thinking like we're talking diets and stuff. It's not about a diet. It's about learning your body's responses. So when you've gone through elimination protocols, it wasn't, hey, I'm never touching this ever again, unless you realize that it doesn't serve you at all. And you don't. Like I avoid gluten, right? Like I just don't. And I haven't missed it much. Like I found good substitutions and it just wasn't worth it. But like you go through the elimination protocol, it's not a diet, it's a discovery. It's a personal discovery of your body's communications. And we've been disempowered in listening to that. And because we've strayed so far from real whole foods, we don't know, like what you discussed, like at Christmas. Yeah, sure. You overindulged and you saw this and that. So did I, right? I mean, after the holidays, like I don't even bake until a few days before Christmas anymore because I just already know it's a disaster. So I put it in a shorter time frame now, but I know from those things, the same things you listed, those are the same triggery foods for me too. And I feel the same way. I get puffy, I get grumpy, my sleep, like all this stuff. But the difference is I know what it is. I know what it is. I think a lot of people wake up, they feel puffy, grumpy, can't sleep, et cetera, and they grab a coffee, they lash out at family, they, don't get out of bed, or maybe they run to the doctor and get put on a prescription or something really quickly before identifying firstly, and at least what your body's telling you just about your basic lifestyle choices, your basic food consumption, your basic stress interactions and relationships and energy and in the areas you go, right? Like that needs to come first, because you may find, like you said, if we focus on the gut, what you know now is that by focusing on the gut, sometimes a lot of the unknowns don't even need to be figured out, because we just stop suffering with the stuff we were suffering with. Like, I love that you made that point. And especially after things like cancer, like when your ecosystem was decimated, if only we didn't know, like, now, right? But we know to put that back together to see how big of a deal it is. That's a big deal if you go on an antibiotic now. If you have to be on an antibiotic because you have something happen, you get in a car accident or, whatever. We know in our world, right? Okay, we better put that gut back. But so many people have gone years without anyone ever telling them they need to put their gut back together until it starts unraveling their mental health and it's unraveling their disease and autoimmunity and all this stuff in their body, right? I love that you brought that part up. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah.
I don't want to tangent too much.
I agree that knowledge is power, and I did not know what my triggers were for these conditions. I didn't even know if it was food related, but when I went on that journey to check out my eating patterns, that's when I gained that knowledge. And I'm not an all or none person. I'm going to eat all of those things at some point. However, I know if I combine them all, it's going to be bad. If I just indulge in one or two, it'll be better. And I then know when I wake up the next day and I don't feel, and my joints hurt and my hands are swollen, I'm like, oh yeah, that chocolate last night wasn't very good, but I'll do better today and just start again, or whatever it may be.
That's not true. That
human.
Chocolate was
We're
amazing.
all human, right?
No, it better be good. See, that's when your body reacts. Yeah. Yeah. And when your body reacts like that, you better believe. Here's the other thing too. You may have been more reckless with indulgence before. Like, sure, I'll eat that really lame, like Hostess, like Twinkie that'll live for 100 years on a counter, right? That's not even very good. So at least when you know your body's going to react to something, you're going to make it worth it. Like I'm going to get that gourmet brownie at that bakery instead of a lame Twinkie. I'm going to do it.
you selectively cheat for the best items for sure. Yes, I totally agree.
Totally. And do you see a difference though, like when you do really work on your gut? Because I hear this a lot, and I know my own opinion on this. But when you work on your gut, that your propensity toward food changes, your cravings and behaviors start to change with food.
For sure. The sugar cravings with the candida overgrowth. Oh my gosh, I would crave sugar. And so there's actually a die-off syndrome when you have that candida that I went through, and it was very harsh. I can't say it. I'm not even going to try. It starts with an H. But after getting through that and staying on that focused diet for several weeks, you don't crave that sugar. Your cravings were directly related to the dysbiosis of your gut. And when you start seeing that, it gives you power. And I had lost weight before my journey, but when I healed my gut, I lost an additional 10 or 12 pounds I wasn't looking to lose. And I was like, oh, well, that's exactly why my hormones weren't balanced. And I have a whole nother hormone imbalance story with my daughter's birth and everything. But most of my 20s and 30s, my hormones were imbalanced. Well, no wonder my gut was imbalanced. And so now it's like one of the first times in my life, although I'm entering in perimenopause, entering menopause, I feel more balanced now than I did when I was younger. So that's kind of an odd little thing.
Yeah. And the pregnancy thing is really interesting too. But when you said that the cravings stopped. They weren't so bad when your gut wasn't so bad. I think that's where people get messed up when that's the difference between when we do elimination protocols and gut work with people versus dieting. Because if you just diet, but you're not focused on really inoculating that gut and getting that gut ecosystem good, you're just dieting, then what people do is they just restrict certain foods or whatever, but they're not changing the chemistry in their microbiome. So they're maybe restricting calories. They're not eating enough. They're not eating whole satiating foods, or they're low on actual nutrients. So their body's screaming for all these things still. Yet when you program, you kind of program the body and the brain through the gut microbiome. I mean, that really is probably the closest way to, I guess, say that, and, so when you went on to have your daughter, my last pregnancy was not planned. I was 35. It was a shocker, and it was during 2020. So it was like, OMG. I mean, the stress I went through during that pregnancy was insane. And so my body reacted, my adrenals reacted. And what, the best people kept telling me were that pregnancy is the stress test of the body. So it's going to show you where you're susceptible or the most vulnerable to things. And for me, it was my thyroid. It was acting out. My thyroid, my blood pressure, which were kind of linked, and not preeclampsia. I had no preeclampsia symptoms, but basically like gestational hypertension, which I had excessive stress to, and my thyroid. So I had this thing it was just, it was giving me so much grief no matter what I did. But I was 35. I was incredibly stressed. I was having a baby. And so when you went through pregnancy, which is really cool, what did that throw you into? So you say that added like another element, like what did you experience then?
My pregnancy was very different because I had infertility issues. And so I couldn't get pregnant for 8 years. I tried. And when I finally went to the fertility specialist, I was diagnosed with something called a I can't say it. Unicordiate uterus. Basically, I had one horn in my uterus. It was half size, and it was all off center on the right side of my belly because the left fallopian tube did not form. Wow. So already my pregnancy was like crazy because we found that out when I was like 37 and 35, I think. So I had a whole surgery to correct that and tie up my uterus to give the left ovary, which had no fallopian tube, the best shot of fertilizing me. So I already had all this. They also felt like I had way high testosterone. It was 3 times that of a normal woman. So I had to go on a low-carb diet at that time to correct my hormones to try and get pregnant. So just getting pregnant was like huge journey for me. So when I finally got pregnant, they did not expect me to last long. And sure enough, at 18 weeks, I started having contractions. And at 24 weeks, I was put on bed rest. So I was on bed rest for most of my pregnancy, and I wasn't in the holistic space then. I was just trying to get through the pregnancy. But looking back, I could tell that my sugars were way off because I had the glucose tolerance test and I tanked. I'd always been hypoglycemic all my life, and I was getting up in the middle of the night to eat, and they told me I had to do that test and how much sugar they were going to give me. And I said, I can't do that. I'll fall on the floor. And they're like, you do that or you be diabetic your whole pregnancy. And so I did it. And sure enough, I go to do the glucose tolerance test and I'm like getting to the end and they draw my blood and I'm like, I was starting to get foggy and I wasn't thinking clearly. And I just was like running to the cafeteria to eat. My blood sugar had dropped like in the 40s, and that's not uncommon for me. So I was definitely having blood sugar issues. In the end, I was having a lot of fluid retention and had a little bit of high blood pressure. So I think had I gone longer, I probably would have gone into that preeclampsia type pregnancy, but it was not an easy pregnancy, but they said I couldn't go for full term. And I walked in there to deliver via C-section because I'd already had surgery on my uterus, but just the miracle it was to go full term under all those circumstances is so amazing.
Wow. Wow. What a blessing. Yeah. So I bet, like I said, the stress test of the body, right? So we have, and then it takes you a couple years. Like postpartum is a whole nother episode that we need to do sometime because nobody talks about that, right? They don't talk about how long it lasts. They don't talk about how it changes if you breastfeed or not, and then you quit breastfeeding, and then like all the stuff that happens, and depending on what age you are, like so many things. And women, I'll say this all the time. This podcast is not just about women. We're not just talking about hormones, but ironically, a lot of the conditions that people are faced with affect hormones and are hormonally related because women they fluctuate so much. And I always say it's not fair. A man's hormones fluctuate with the rise and fall of the sun on a daily basis consistently. That's it. The rise and fall of the sun. A woman's hormones fluctuate depending on what time of the month it is, like multiple times throughout the month and the day, and her stress levels and all these things. Like, it is incredible. So no wonder we're susceptible to just getting totally wonked out. And then you're crazy. No one can figure out. Yet you are crazy. We are crazy when we're not okay because it messes with our head, but it's not in our head only. That's the thing that nobody. So, Kristin, from this point on, so you obviously are here for a reason. Why you? Why not you? I think you are the perfect ambassador of all the things that you've given to everybody thus far today and in the future. So what are you doing past this point? Like, what are you doing? You've got all this education and the coaching and everything. What are you bringing to people? And lastly, where can you find you?
So I am doing one-on-one sessions to help women empower themselves to be better through a holistic approach, which means mind, body, and spirit. You have to take all that into account. I do specialize in gut health, and I utilize hypnotherapy to get to those subconscious eating patterns that people use. That has been an amazing journey and something that I think is overlooked quite a bit. And I'm actually launching a new gut health group. And I'm going to use your educational platform and your elimination protocol because I think it's so valuable.
You're a Buddha Belly coach.
So I'm really excited to do a group platform just because not everyone has the time or the energy or the finances to invest on that one-on-one type care. But the group space, I think, will allow more people. I'll be able to reach more people and make more of a difference in their life. And then in the future, I hope to envision more group coaching spaces. And I have a unique model where I give people a free 90-minute consult and an hour follow-up for absolutely free. And the reason why is because I want to serve people powerfully. I want them to have a great experience. And when they do that, they'll tell someone else about it. So I offer those free sessions just so people can get to know me and to help them. And if we're a good fit and they want to work with me, fine. If not, that's fine too. So I think that's kind of unique in the coaching world to give that much of yourself. And that's just because I want to give back. And then on a personal note, I am going to write my book because it's like one of my bucket list items. I was kind of doing my holistic life review and saying, what would I regret if I didn't do? And it was telling my story. Telling my story was the big thing that kept coming up with me. Now, I'm scared. I'm really scared. It's a vulnerable position. It's got some really vulnerable parts, but I want to thank you for inviting me here. Just sharing it here has been very powerful, speaking it out loud, and I'm so excited what the future will bring.
Yes, Kristy. Well, thank you for doing that. And we are all excited to hear you and watch you. So you guys, I'm going to, in the notes, I'm going to put links to all of her stuff. So where you can find her on social media, any like web pages and anything, and you can keep up with her upcoming book and all that she's doing now in coaching. Thank you, Kristy. Thank you guys for joining another awesome podcast.
Thank you for joining us for another empowering episode of Buddha Belly Life. For more information on gut health and mindset resources, visit buddhabellylife.com. And remember, heal yourself and then empower others to do the same.